really prevent that Trick Room going up. Because I think on the face value of this match, if you look at Francesco's side of the field, you think that Trick Room looks so strong. If that Porygon 2 gets a Trick Room set up, the Ursaluna in, you've got the Amoonguss to disrupt things that aren't protected by things like their typing, like the Sinistcha, and that safety goggles on the Incineroar, you can really start to put things to sleep. So I think Jonathan has to manage that. You do have the Trick Room to reverse it with the Sinistcha, and that's maybe one way to get yourself out of a sticky situation.
Well, here we go, Pokemon Trainers. Swiss Round 10 is kicking off. We've got the Pelipper with the Incineroar front and center for Jonathan, and on the opposing side, the Porygon 2 and the Vivillon is in play. I feel like Vivillon's going to have a hard time up against this Incineroar.
Yeah, it is going to be susceptible to that fake out now. So is the Porygon 2. Neither of these have that cover clock to avoid the flinch here. And Jonathan in a position where they can go for the Tailwind, but do you go for it knowing that there is the impending threat of the Trick Room? Maybe you just want to get damage onto the field. Vivillon, like you've said, is threatened here quite heavily. The Trick Room, the fake out into it, of course, and then a double up into it. If it doesn't go for that Terastallization, of course, you can avoid the fake out if you do Terastallize. But do you want to commit the Terastallization on that Pokemon when you've got such big hitters in the back? Maybe you don't, but maybe you value that fake out. That Terastallization for later. We get off to a start with that fake out into the Porygon 2.
Well, it's allowed to do what it wants to do, right? It goes straight away for that Sleep Powder, connects on the opposing Pelipper as the fake out was indeed going down into the Porygon 2. Maybe Jonathan worried about exactly what you were saying there, Lee. The Ghost Terastallization that would have meant the normal type fake out would have had no effect onto Vivillon.
Yeah, and it's like almost calling the bluff there, right? You saying, okay, well, it's so tempting, it's so obvious that the fake out would be into the Vivillon, so you're probably not going to go for that. You're going to go for the Porygon 2 because how strong that Trick Room is, and taking full advantage of that and shutting down that Pelipper for at least one turn of sleep, getting right back into turn 2, reacting with a Terastallization.
Straight away, getting the stage all beautiful and bejeweled with the Terastallization of the Porygon 2 into that Fighting Terra type. Has really risen in dominance to be able to tackle down against the normal types and the dark types that have been emerging, like King Gambit, for example. Hurricane will come down and connect onto the Incineroar, do about a third of damage, which is very respectable, and Pelipper knows it's important, wakes up on that first turn and is able to go for the Hurricane into Vivillon. It is, of course, holding that focus sash. Will not be able to get the one-hit KO, but puts it in a vulnerable position going forward.
Yeah, and now it all comes down to this Porygon 2. Is it going to go for an attacking move, which it's likely to do after Terastallizing, or is it going to go for the Trick Room, which it can't do after the taunt from that Incineroar? Terra Blast coming out. Is it going to be enough? The double up from the Vivillon and the Porygon 2 into this Incineroar, and it is enough. Huge knockout here on turn 2 of this game 1 between Francesco and Jonathan.
This is just what we were saying. The Fighting Terra type has really risen up to counter against all the dark types out there. Incineroar, yes, we know it for its kind of offensive fire pressure, but it is also running that dark type, so will be susceptible to the fighting type moves.
Yeah, now the Basculegion comes in and it causes a bit of a problem for this Vivillon as well as that Porygon 2. It doesn't really have a way to attack this Basculegion. Terra Blast is not going to affect it. It's got the immunity through the Ghost typing, and of course Ice Beam unaffected as well because it's going to be resisted. So that Vivillon in a spot where it is going to have to protect or switch out, or whether or not that Francesco just wants to allow it to go down, set the Trick Room up here because you don't have... Oh, sorry, it's taunted, so there's no Trick Room.
Oh, yeah,
it has to attack this turn. Or even with the Rain up as well, with that Life Orb, the Basculegion in a spot where it could go after that Porygon 2. But I think you have to prioritize that Vivillon, get rid of it, because you don't want any more Sleep Powders being put onto the field.
Well, as you said, Porygon 2 can't really do too much here, so let's switch it out, reset that taunt as well, so it can come back fresh and ready later on in the match. Basculegion is going to go for the Wave Crash, but it does not find a target, as the Vivillon has quite wisely gone defensively and protected in this turn. It leaves Pelipper up to go for the Hurricane now. Of course, not going to do too much to the opposing Golden Go, but there could be that secondary effect. But not today. Golden Go is staying sharp and focused.
Yeah, and probably that chip's quite useful here, because if the Basculegion goes into that Golden Go now, it's probably going to be able to pick up the knockout there. The problem is if you leave that Vivillon unchecked, you are going to get punished by a Sleep Powder more than likely, or even worse, maybe the speed control gets set up with that Tailwind, which could put that Golden Go into a really good position, although it's not really got the attacking options onto the Pelipper to do super effective damage. It has got that threat of the Shadow Ball onto the Basculegion if it doesn't Terastallize this turn. So things to think about from Jonathan. Do you click in, commit to that Terastallization, get that big damage off, and which Pokemon do you target? The Vivillon's just protected, so it's an easy target, but if you leave that Goldingo alone, there's always a threat that it will get a nasty plot up, and you want to try and avoid that if possible, because once it starts stacking those up, those Make It Rains, well, they're going to be doing so much damage.
And you really don't want to leave that Vivillon unchecked as well. We've seen how accurate Sleep Powders are, it could easily find its mark down on either of the Pokemon on Jonathan's side. But you are going to commit to the Terrestrialization. This is going to be a full force wave crash. You got the Terrestrialization, you got the Life Orb, you got the Rain on the field. This is going to be powerful, and it is so much damage into 1 HP, but necessary because you KO the Vivillon, and if that had been a switch into another Pokemon, you're likely getting the one-hit KO as well.
Yeah, it's a great choice. I think the smartest choice there, not to take any risks. Now, you are taking a Shadow Ball, but because you've Terrestrialized, you've got rid of that weakness, so you're able to survive. Special defense drop, not the best thing that you want to be seeing if you're Jonathan, but you're still on the field, you're still in the game, and now followed up by a Muddy Water. Huge Muddy Water, single target into that Goldingo, enough to take it down. And now you're in a position with Jonathan where that Porygon 2 is going to come back onto the field. It's got that Terrestrialization. It's going to be weak to the flying type attacks from the Pelipper, and you're sitting next to a Basculegion with a Life Orb in the Rain, Water Terra type. Those multipliers are stacking up, and Ursaluna coming onto the field is not the Pokemon that wants to see that fish on Jonathan's side.
I mean, Basculegion's got moves, but Pelipper does too. It's able to go for that Muddy Water single target connect and get the knockout. It doesn't need all those additional boosts. It has an incredible special attack stat as it is, as well as the Rain boosting up. And both these Pokemon, as you've said, do not want to face down against either of the choices on Jonathan's side. The very speedy Basculegion with Swift Swim activated is going to be the first thing to move in this field, and it can go for this Wave Crash, connect down into the opposing Porygon 2, and remove it from play. You don't even have to go for the Hurricane here. Maybe it's going to be Pelipper that cleans up.
Yeah, maybe it is, but that is a huge attack, and you can see the benefit of that Life Form when you've got it stacked in this field condition with the Rain. The Pelipper now going to be able to target down the Ursaluna. The Basculegion going down to that recoil, of course, one of the drawbacks of Wave Crash and the Life Orb, but now you're going to get this Hurricane full force into the Ursaluna and do some very respectable damage with that the Flame Orb activating, and then the chip on that. It's going to take it below 50%. The Rain does stop, but Jonathan's still got one Pokemon in the back remaining to be brought in, and will it be enough to take down? It's going to be a hard job for this Ursaluna, especially when it hasn't got that speed control on the field that it really does prefer to have.
I mean, regardless of the partner Pokemon, the Pelipper's the difficulty for Ursaluna here. It can only hit it with Facade, and the Focus Sash is still intact, so you're going to have to hit it twice to be able to get the knockout. Yes, the Rain has gone. The Hurricanes will not be affected by the accuracy anymore. But speaking of accuracy, the Muddy Water is going to miss. It gives Ursaluna the opportunity to go for the Headlong Rush, but as we've already identified, you still have to be able to hit the Pelipper. But now the Rain has actually gone. Hurricane doesn't have that 100% accuracy, and Muddy Water, as you can see, isn't accurate either.
No, it's not, and that Muddy Water is not something that Jonathan wants to see here. But the one thing you would say that Jonathan still has in their back pocket is the Focus Sash on the Pelipper. Really good item choice here. So even if you do take a Facade, you're still going to be able to kind of stall this out, take one attack if your Muddy Waters do miss, and a really smart play by Jonathan here to allow that burn chip just to get a bit further down, because after one more tick, it looks like the Ursaluna will be out of this game. So if your Muddy Water misses, you'll take the Facade, and then you can close this up. Jonathan coming down very close in this game, but we're just seeing that cancellation locked in. Jonathan 1-0 going into this first game.
Yeah, Pelipper really navigating into that win condition there towards the end and sealing up the game for Jonathan. I have to say, Pelipper was outstanding in that match. Not only was it able to bring the Rain to the field to facilitate Basculegion's power as well, but Pelipper, it got put to sleep in turn 1 and then woke up after that first turn sleep, and that was critical. Being able to get the Hurricane pressure, the Muddy Water pressure, and keep its Focus Sash intact is what enabled Jonathan this first game victory.
Yeah, and I like the way that Jonathan led out with the Incineroar there, kind of baiting out Francesco to go for that fighting type Terrestrialization, knowing further down the line, well, if you go for that and I can get rid of your Vivillon, then it's going to be easy for me to position my Pelipper next to the Basculegion and kind of just start to pick things off, because if you're concentrating on attacking, being the offensive threat that Francesco did in that first game, you're not concentrating on the speed control, which is maybe something that Francesco missed there, because I think if you had the speed control in some situation there, it would have made it easier for the likes of Porygon 2, the likes of Ursaluna to perform a little bit better than they did in that game. Made it easy for Jonathan just to have that board position. Didn't even need to think about their own speed control, because you've naturally got that Swift Swim with the Basculegion. It can come in, it can pressure with the Life Orb, with the Rain, the Terrestrialization, and then the Pelipper, like you say, was really the star of the show, just being able to sit there. It did get the one-turn wake-up, which is hugely fortunate for Jonathan, a bit unfortunate for Francesco, but that's how it goes sometimes. You can only sleep for a maximum of 3 turns. You're going to wake up on one of them, and utilizing the ability of that Hurricane, the Muddy Water as well. Huge damage into that Goldingo.
I feel like I would love to see Francesco go for the Trick Room mode straight away here, bringing the Porygon 2 in, trying to get that Trick Room up. You can then have Ursaluna and the Amoonguss potentially in a prime position to start applying a lot of pressure to Jonathan's team. The issue is that Incineroar, the fact that it's got that safety goggles, means you can't even try and put it to sleep with the Sleep Powder to enable the Porygon 2 to get the Trick Room up, because the the taunt from the Incineroar going into the Porygon 2 will completely shut that down. So once you've maybe found a way to deal with the Incineroar, then you can get that Trick Room mode up and start trying to gain some momentum.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting if we see the same leads here. Will Jonathan fall for the same trick twice, you know? Will they not fake out into the Vivillon this time and get punished for it? But we are going to be going back into game 2 here. We've got Francesco changing it up slightly with the Incineroar included now alongside that Vivillon, and Jonathan sticking with that tried and tested lead of the Incineroar and the Pelipper.
Yes, it looked like the Incineroar on Francesco's side was able to get the Intimidator, possibly indicating that it might be a little speedier, and thus the Fake Out will be able to go first as well. But of course, it could still be a speed tie at this point. We'll have to find out.
That's the big thing. I think the question here is which one goes for the Fake Out, and if they both go for it, are they going to go into breaking sashes on the opposing Pokemon? The Vivillon on Francesco's side has the Focus Sash. The Pelipper has it. We saw how useful that Focus Sash was at the end game there. Give that little blanket of security to make sure that Jonathan had the comfort to lock up that game despite those misses. So you kind of want to keep that intact as much as possible. Do you go for it? Do you protect your Pokemon? Or do you kind of try and scout out ways around the Fake Out? Maybe switch your Pokemon, reposition?
But once again, Sparkle's on the stage nice and early on in this Swiss round 10. This time it's going to be on the Incineroar, going for that Ghost Terror type, meaning that it's not going to fall victim to Fake Out or potentially a Fighting type move a little bit later on. It's going to be the Incineroar on Francesco's side as Vivillon makes a more defensive play, going straight away for the Protect in case that Fake Out was coming its way. But there is no Fake Out coming through on Jonathan's side. Instead, the Tailwind is activated by the Pelipper as Incineroar was trying to shut down those status moves with the Taunt instead. Yeah,
I love this play where you're just not even going for the Fake Out because of the threat of that Ghost type terrestrialization that we've seen on both sides of the field. Now you can see Francesco kind of going for that. The Tailwind, unfortunately, one of those things that has fired off and not really effective in this game at all. You know, the Vivillon now under threat from the Pelipper, where the Hurricane's going to do, you know, big damage, take it down to its sash with the Hurricane. We're seeing that now, and will the Incineroar be in a position to kind of get rid of it before it is effective at all?
And the accuracy is 100% when Rain is on the field for the Hurricane, so you don't have to worry about it missing its mark, as Incineroar can follow up with that knockoff and remove Vivillon from play. Of course, the Incineroar on the opposing side now does have free Rain, but Flare Blitz in the Rain isn't going to do too much. Knockoff, however, could be a nice play to remove one of those items, or you can go for the Party Shot and just reduce the offensive pressure that the Incineroar has, as well as allowing Francesco the opportunity to pivot around his entire board.
Yeah, you can see the reasoning. You would have loved to have seen the Parting Shot from Francesco into the Pelipper, but the kind of impending maybe Protect there puts you off a little bit. So you can see why you might want to not risk going into a Protect and going for an easy slot where the Incineroar hasn't got the Protect, and you go for that one. But the Pelipper now, again, one of those Pokemon that is being ignored slightly. The Incineroar cycling in back onto the field for Francesco is nice because you've got the position where you can go for the Fake Out and you can go for the Trick Room. The problem is, as we're seeing, Jonathan has access to the Ghost Terrestrialization on their own Incineroar. Now, if you go for that Ghost Terrestrialization, it's going to open you up to avoid that Fake Out and go for a Taunt into that Porygon 2 and lock it out. It's not going to be able to go for that Trick Room and make things very difficult. And also, the Terrestrialization's being eaten up on Francesco's side now, so you don't have the ability to go for that Fighting Terrestrialization type and have that super effective damage into the Incineroar either, so it makes it very difficult.
Porygon 2 honestly looks stuck. Like you said, it cannot turn into a Fighting type anymore and use its Terra Blast to good effect. That's why it's now going to be in a lot of trouble. You maybe will take the Taunt, then you can't go for Trick Room. Even something like a knockoff coming through from the Incineroar can really get rid of that Eviolite and make it a lot more vulnerable. But I think you've got to shut down that Trick Room first, and there doesn't seem to be a way for Jonathan to be stopped from being able to go for that. Yeah, exactly that, and we are going to see the Terrestrialization come out from Jonathan's side finally, and matching Francesco with that Ghost Terra-type Incineroar. The Hurricane fired out, no Fake Outs from the opposite side of the field, and we're just getting some damage into that Porygon 2, followed by that Taunt, preventing any speed control from that Porygon 2. Hey, there could be some Ice Beam shenanigans coming through any moment. Knockoff now will be super effective into the Ghost-type Incineroar, but of course only gets about 50% damage. The Ice Beam, however, does a significant chunk to Pelipper, breaks the Focus Sash, but it's still in play. It's still speedy, and another one of these Hurricanes can really start doing some damage. Yeah, and it's a really nice play from Francesco there in particular, not falling for the bait of the Fake Out, the Trick Room, because knowing of the impending threat from that Terrestrialization and then the Taunt, just getting some useful damage on the field. I like the offensive kind of approach to that last turn. It puts Jonathan in a little more of a tricky situation. Now you've got to decide, do you let the Pelipper potentially go down, because with the Muddy Water you're not going to be able to pick up the knockout on either, and you can see that want to preserve that the Rain for later on in this match, bringing our Chaladon in its place. I really love how cognizant Jonathan is of those Rain turns, because you want to make sure, considering the fact we've got this Chaladon on the field, the Raid is going to be there to help out Electro Shot, and the Focus Sash is broken, so Pelipper is vulnerable. Incineroar's going going to get the knockoff on the Ursaluna as it comes in. That Flame Orb is gone. It's not going to get a Guts boost for the remainder of this game too. Parting Shot will fall down onto the opposing Archaladon. That's unfortunate that it's going to get its special attack dropped. However, with a couple of Electro shots, it's going to be able to boost that right back up.
That's a massive turn here from Jonathan, getting that knockoff onto the Ursaluna. That's going to prevent it being burnt. Now, that Guts ability not active. It's going to be half as impactful as it would normally be. So a really easy Pokemon to kind of deal with. Has it got enough, though, to take down that Incineroar, because you want to really be preventing the taunt, and I think because of the speed stats of all these Pokemon, you've got to say the Incineroar is going to be going before the Ursaluna, so you've got that easy taunt into that slot. Whether or not Francesco picks up on that and says, okay, well, this is just a bait because I'm just going to cycle my Incineroar back onto the field. It's a little bit dangerous doing that, of course, because you can potentially get
fall victim to it, right?
Well, you can fall victim to a double up from maybe the Archaladon and then a knockoff from the Incineroar as well, because I think if you're Jonathan, you're chasing down, getting rid of that Eviolite on the Porygon too, so it's an easy slot to either go for the taunt or go for the knockoff into that slot. And, you know, we're not going to see any switches, so we'll see how things are going to play out. Is Francesco risking getting a Trick Room up, but seeing no taunt?
Well, Archaladon, speediest thing on the field at the moment, getting its special attack boosted back up to neutral, and is able to go for this powerful Electro Shot into the Porygon 2. A couple more of those, and it's going to be dealing more and more damage every time. It looked like Porygon 2 was really just dancing around the field, trying to avoid the taunt, but eventually will have to face it and get its status moves reduced. Headlong Rush tries to get the knockout. It does indeed onto that opposing Incineroar, but I think this is almost nice for Jonathan. If the rain goes away at the end of this turn, you can bring Pelipper back in and reset that up, or you can bring that fourth and final Pokemon in. Yeah,
it's a nice KO here from Francesco to get rid of that Incineroar, but unfortunately the damage was done with that taunt into the Porygon 2, and you can see Francesco trying to play the mind games here, because every turn before never went for the Trick Room, but committing to it here. And yeah, Jonathan reading him like a book. Now being able, like you say, to play the weather beautifully. The rain ended. Now you're able to get that Pelipper back onto the field. You've got that Electroshock active. You still have to worry about the Ursaluna, of course. It is going to be hitting you for super effective damage on the Archaladon. You've used up your terrestrialization, so you do need to be wary of that. But now you have that Pelipper on the field. It can fire off those Muddy Waters if you like, and you don't need the speed control at this stage, because everything on your side of the field, if you're Jonathan, is naturally faster than everything on Francesco's.
Yeah, that's the thing. We saw in Game 1 that the Pelipper with the Muddy Water can be so devastating into the Ursaluna, and I'm not surprised to see it get out of there as well. This is not the ideal situation for it, and at least with the Incineroar coming on, Intimidate not really being valid here, but the fake out pressure into that following turn could be very useful.
Yeah, it could be, and we're going to see the Incineroar make its way onto the field. Is it going to be the target of an Electro Shot, or is it going to be into that Porygon 2 that is now taunted? It can't recover, it can't Trick Room, it can only attack. If an Ice Beam comes into that Pelipper, you might be targeting into that Porygon 2 to get rid of it, so you preserve that Pelipper for later on in this game. And we are going to see the Muddy Water. It is going to connect, and it is into the Porygon 2. Enough with this rain up to take that little duck down.
Yeah, Porygon 2 had a bit of a rough time in this match anyway, constantly being shut down with those taunts and not being able to get offensive pressure off with the terrestrialization like it did in Game 1. So at least now Francesco has the opportunity to bring its powerhouse onto the field, but it has been neutralized with the fact that Flame Orb has gone. Pelipper in prime position to go for another one of these Muddy Waters, as well as the fact that the Archaladon can always try and go for something like a Body Press at this range to just keep tackling down against this opposing Ursaluna.
Yes, and that's the thing. I think you've got the active fake out here, so you can go into the Archaladon to prevent it attacking this turn, but by doing that, are you activating a stamina boost? And that's the thing you want to kind of avoid, because if you do activate that, you're giving the Body Press more damage, more ability to remove that Ursaluna even quicker. But I think you've got to prioritize that Muddy Water here, because if the Muddy Water comes off into the Ursaluna with the rain on the field at the moment, it looks like it's going to be maybe close to picking up the knockout. We do see that fake out. Prevented this turn, and another Electro Shot, another boost, and this time going to be into that Incineroar. Will it be enough?
I feel like the fake out was the right target, though, because those Muddy Waters would hit hard, and as you said, the Electro Shots can't go down into the Ursaluna. They will have to find their mark onto the opposing Incineroar, but it is enough to be able to get the knockout. Potentially, there could have been some wiggle room and defensive capabilities for the Incineroar, but not today. It has been felled.
It has been felled, and the Ursaluna left all on its own. The Pelipper, fortunately, can't move this turn. Where is the Headlong Rush? It's into that Archaladon, and it is enough. Clean knockout. Critical hit, though, without that Flame Orb boost, but the Pelipper still intact on the field. The rain's still active, and you've got that super effective Muddy Water, which will now be a single target attack. You don't have the comfort of that Focus Sash like we had in Game 1, but the best partner has been saved for last. You don't need to worry about the Pelipper, because you've got the Basket Legion. It's coming onto the field, and it's going to make easy, quick work of this Ursaluna.
This is the Devastator here. Now, I think if you're Francesco, you can always try and go for some protects, but eventually they they will run out, and the Wave Crash will connect, get the knockout, and Jonathan Marston will be the winner of Swiss Round 10. What a match.